called Conscious Capitalism. Our chapter, which is called C3MD, is a purpose-driven business community that promotes the power of capitalism to create positive change, do good, and elevate humanity. We inspire and equip individuals and organizations to embrace and implement conscious business principles through collaboration, educational programs, practical tools, and strategic partnerships. As part of the conscious capitalism movement, we are seeking to better understand and practice the 4 pillars of conscious business, which are stakeholder orientation, purpose, conscious culture, and conscious leadership. So we spent the first quarter of the year focusing our discussions around stakeholder orientation, but today we're going to be moving on to purpose. So today and the next 2 events, we'll be focusing on this pillar. And so this is basically the idea that a business and their people are more likely to thrive when business is built around meaningful purpose beyond simply making money. But before we get started, I'd like to say a big thank you to today's sponsors who helped make this event possible, which are Insight 180 Brand Consulting and Design, Kevin Howard CPA, and Indigo Ink Digital Printing. And now I'm going to hand this over to Tanya, who's the chair of our membership committee, who will share a little bit about becoming a member.
Oh, thanks so much, Liz. Welcome everyone. It's a beautiful day to be here, and welcome. I would like to invite everyone on the call to find out a little bit more about Conscious Capitalism Central Maryland. I'd like to invite you to become a member. We have 3 membership categories now. So whether you are a small business owner, an individual, or a member of a larger enterprise, there's a membership category that will suit your needs. We are a strong and growing community of people involved in business, doing good and doing well. As Liz mentioned, we have embraced the 4 pillars of conscious capitalism. So if you're interested in learning more, I hope that you will get involved. I will throw in the chat when I am done talking the link that you can use to sign up and learn more. Some of the benefits of membership that you will receive are a listing on our website in the membership section, so that you can kind of get involved and see who the other people in the community, kind of a little chamber of commerce for conscious capitalists. You'll get discounted or free rates to some of our Zoom events and hopefully soon in-person events. We also offer access to curated content about conscious capitalism. If you're just starting your journey, or if you know a lot about conscious capitalism, we have more resources for you. And we also have a logo you can put on your website to identify yourself as a conscious capitalist. Please don't also hesitate to call me if you would like to learn more. I'll put my contact information in the chat. And I'm going to give it back to Liz to introduce our speakers today. Welcome.
Thanks. And just a few housekeeping things. Make sure that your mic is muted, but I'm going to have the panelists unmute their mic. And throughout this conversation, if you have any questions that you want to ask the panelists, just feel free to put that into the chat. And Wendy's going to keep track of that and let us know if there's any questions that come in. And I did think of something and now I forgot, so hopefully it wasn't important. So with no further ado, I am going to introduce the 3 guests. Jules Shepard of gluten-free, GF Jules gluten-free flour, Jordan Dara of Print Relief, and Holly and George Stone of Clarksville Commons in the Common Kitchen. And all 3 are founders of businesses that I consider to be purpose-driven businesses. So I'm going to have the 3 of them each take about 5 minutes to tell us a little bit about themselves and their business. So we're going to start with Jules.
Thanks, Liz. I really appreciate y'all inviting me to join you today. I've been learning more about the group through Liz for about a year now, and it's been very intriguing to me because the pillars are things that I kind of have embraced happenstantially, I guess, through starting my business many years ago, and never really purposefully did it. But looking back on it, I'm like, hey, I did that. And that's pretty cool that, you know, there are other people out there, like-minded souls, entrepreneurs who are very intentionally trying to embrace these same concepts. And really trying to do well and do good, as Tanya said, like, really going about business in what I consider to be the right way. My business is a gluten-free business, and it is founded on the principles of helping other people, because I needed the help myself when I was diagnosed with celiac disease many, many years ago. And there were other things that I found that I needed that were not in existence. And so basically I looked around and saw a need, and I had that need, and there were other people who also had the need. And so I decided I'm going to fill that need. And the needs were the books, resources, help, consulting, factual, vetted information, as well as food. And the best way to get food to people was to, in my mind, was to give them the resources they needed to make it themselves, because it was just too difficult to get ready-made food to everyone. And my mission was to reach as many people as possible. So I decided to write cookbooks and to start a blog so that I could teach people how to cook gluten-free, because it's a completely different animal. And I started traveling the country. Obviously, this is way before COVID, teaching people how to cook. And I started doing videos, and also, obviously doing lectures and other types of educational platforms and formats. And then also started a company that was making flour and baking mixes. This all started around 2007. And that was the first iteration of the company. And at the time, I had to take on some equity business partners, because I was not able to do it all by myself. And Liz knows this intimately, being a good friend of mine through the years, on all the trials and tribulations that I had to go through in my early business life, that there were problems along the way with the way I viewed what I wanted to do in the business, and how I wanted the business to help people and not to compromise. And we had differences of opinions on how those things would continue as the business grew. And ultimately, there was a pretty ugly falling out in the business between myself and those equity partners. And I had to ultimately restart the business all over again from scratch, literally from nothing. And it has been a very hard slog. But my husband and I restarted the business in 2014, and are doing it again, like from the beginning, with heart and soul and purpose. And I think that's really the only way that we would ever have been able to do this, is if we didn't believe 100% in the mission of helping people, and if we didn't hear from people every single day that we have changed lives, and if we didn't 100% believe we weren't compromising in our ingredients, in our ultimate mission to help as many people as possible in all the different possible ways we could. And and at the end of the night, every night, to lay down at night and feel like we have done what we could to reach as many people and help as many people, then we would never have had the energy or the strength or the drive to have done it the first time, much less to do it the second time. And I think we can get into that more, with some questions that I know Liz has, and some other people might have as well, about how all that transpired. But the purpose is the business. There would be no business for me if there wasn't the purpose. And so I see a lot of people now, and I'm glad that they are, the B Corps and other things, looking around saying, you need to find a way to find that purpose and tell people what your purpose is, so that they'll want to buy your product or whatever. And that's great. And I'm glad that there are lots of people out there who are searching for something and a way to give back. But it's funny, because this business that I'm in would not have ever existed if it wasn't for the purpose. And it is the heart and the soul of the company. And it is definitely what keeps us going. It's the intangibles that pay us, because we certainly aren't making tons of money, but we're making enough to survive. But it's the intangibles that really pay us, and that's the heart and the soul of the company.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And that's a good
Yeah.
point, that your business, the purpose is sort of the foundation of what your business is. It's not something that you're like an add-on. And it's one of the reasons why I picked the three of you guys, because on the surface, it was already baked in.
Yeah. I
So,
love that you use baked.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, it's baked.
Holly and George, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. And thank you for asking us. We had never heard of the organization, and the more we read about it and then read about also the folks you've also invited on the panel, it was like, we want to do that. We want to do that. We want to get trees every time we Xerox something. So thank you for having us. George didn't know if he'd be here, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about both of us. It's kind of interesting that I'm from the East Coast, George is from the West Coast, but we both grew up in families that were family businesses. So we were already knowledgeable about what it takes to be in a small business. And then we both went off and did something totally different. George is actually a PhD in neurobiology. I went off to school to get my BS in environmental sciences and environmental education. And we're really happy doing that. And then business opportunity presented itself. We both in the sciences and with an environmental ethic, we purchased an old piece of property in Maine that was actually a camp I had gone to as a kid, and we turned it into a camp for families. And as we grew that, we then opened a retreat center for the arts and sciences. So we got our taste of business, and well, we're doing pretty well. Or, you know, it was, I won't say it was paying the bills, because we kept the other jobs we had while we were building the businesses. But it's really interesting. I don't know if any of you have kids that are thinking about going to camp, but camp isn't particularly a green company. A lot of camps use a lot of disposables. They don't think about it. It isn't part of their activity center. And everything we do there, we call subversive environmental education. Like, you don't realize what you're doing, but you're learning something, and you'll probably take it home without ever talking about it.
And I would say that in the now 27 years that we've run the camp each summer, we've really come to appreciate the importance of community. And we've also come to appreciate the fact that, as Holly puts it, this sort of subversive ways of sharing the importance and the relevance of sustainability and environmental ethic. It takes, people go away with that, you're not sure they've got it, but then when they come back the next time, they are all totally into it. So it really encouraged us to say, well, this is a way that you can do this while still making it a feel-good experience.
Having that under our belts, for years, we live in Clarksville, Maryland, and we have 4 children. And many times driving to and from school, when Clarksville was cornfields on one side and a forest on the other, which is now Kendall's and on one side, and the giant,
Big Village Center.
River Hill Village Center. As we drove by this old school, we kept saying, we need a place for community, because none of our kids were in school anymore. There was no community gathering spot. And we kept driving by the school and saying, wow, I wonder what they're going to do with that. And then we found out what they wanted to do with it. And that was our opportunity to say, ooh, we could just renovate it. We could take the first floor and make a community area, and the second floor have it incubator companies, and on the top floor it would all be artists' studios. It would be inexpensive. It's a great school. It had good bones, but unfortunately it had a lot of oil seepage underneath of it and a lot of asbestos in it. And so when we got our idea to do a nice little project, it became a very big project. beyond the realm of anything that we could do, but we knew we wanted to prove sustainable practices. We knew we wanted a community space. We knew what we wanted, and we had wanted to do it ourselves, but
Well, what we did was the county, when it made the property available, there were certain criteria that they wanted met too, and it was completely compatible with what we wanted to do. We wanted it to be sustainable. We wanted to be able to practice what we had been doing up in Maine, but to do it closer to home. And so what came out of it was this project we call Clarksville Commons, which is, as we put it, it's a mixed-use sustainable commercial center unlike any of the others in the region. We not only, have 10 or 12 different tenants that are all retail and office, but what we've done is established a set of criteria that if you want to, first of all, we only cater to or have local businesses as our tenant. There are no national chain businesses, not to discriminate against them, but there's a lot of other places in suburban Washington, D.C. area that you can do that. So these are all local businesses, number one. And number two, they had to sign on to, as part of their leases, doing their businesses sustainably. So everything has to be compostable. There's no plastics. Everybody has to be cognizant of what we see as a set of criteria that they can live with without having to spend a lot of money. Moreover, we built into this site all kinds of sustainable aspects that the community, the public, can see when they come to the Commons, where we have events in the summer, especially almost every night, in order to get people to really experience this as a gathering place. And then on top of it, we came up with this idea of this thing called the Common Kitchen.
so when we went into a project that was bigger than what we had really envisioned, first of all, we needed partners. There was no way to do this without partners, both knowledge-wise, economically, everything that it takes to start something that's 10 times bigger than you planned on, right? But we weren't going to lose the fact that it's not so subversive now. We've got wayfindings, little signs that are all around the Commons that'll say, look at the solar tree and this is how much electricity it puts off. People think we're brewing beer, but we're really gathering water in these large tanks and we're using them to irrigate the property and all these kinds of things. And so we can lead the horse to water, but we can't make it drink, right? So it's those kind of trade-offs, I guess you could call them.
Do you want to talk about the Common Kitchen real quick?
And the Common Kitchen was the piece about working with incubator businesses. So we saw all these food trucks and said, where are they going to cook? And they were going into DC or they were going out to Frederick or somewhere. And we said, well, these are young, either age-wise or experience-wise entrepreneurs that they can't afford to go into a store, but we could build a common kitchen that they could all use and then sell their wares out front. And that's where the idea for the Common Kitchen came up. And we've been so lucky to actually have had these boundaries put around us because we also have restaurants and we couldn't compete with the restaurants. So what did that mean? That meant we had to look at really niche food businesses, and it really worked to our advantage because now we have it's really an international food hall, and they're all young entrepreneurs that never ever thought they were actually going to get out of their own kitchens. So every time we walk in there, it's become like a big family, and it's like It's been a really hard year of not hugging when you walk into a place, but
in closing, for a summary, again, it underscores the importance of community. It's just amazing what a good feeling it is when people come on the property and actually spend time looking at the little plaques that we have up that sort of tell them about sustainability, but then go into a place like the Common Kitchen that totally supports a very diverse cultural food opportunities, and people come out and it's fulfilling to us and to them. And it doesn't get better than that.
And we've been able to quit our other jobs.
Yay.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I find that I did visit your website, and I think that your business and all the businesses are so fascinating. And having driven past the building a few times, I actually did think you were brewing beer. So that's interesting to know that you're collecting water. That's cool. Okay, Jordan, you're next.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today. Appreciate everybody joining. It's really cool, like Jules and Holly and George were saying, to have an organization that draws awareness and attention to this type of thinking, and I think action towards, organizing around businesses where it makes sense to do well by doing good. And like Jules, my journey and background is really more happenstance. I didn't really seek anything in a formal way around conscious capitalism, but that's certainly been where I landed. Prior to the company I started, now run, called Print Relief, I was in the print industry for 10 years, and I ran a sales organization for a pretty large print services provider. I live in Colorado, so we served this market and westward to California, down through Arizona. And we built a really fast growing print services company throughout that region. And I was fortunate to lead it on the sales side. And so we were doing really well from a business perspective, but I was spending every day, all day, with salespeople in front of customers, talking about how I could save them money on their printing. And after a while, that just didn't do it for me anymore. Didn't matter how well the business was doing. I was having trouble getting up out of bed, knowing that I was going to be talking about the same things with just a number on my back to hit somebody else's idea of a quota. So that started to wear on me. At the same time, I had 2 boys that were born at the latter end of that 10-year run. And something else happened in that last year that I was at that company. Some of our customers were starting to ask, for sustainable ideas. What was our company doing from a sustainability perspective to help them manage their print environment in a more sustainable way? And the first answer we had was, well, we're not doing really anything, except we're picking up your empty toner cartridges and helping you recycle paper and kind of basic things that people have been doing for decades. And I had this idea of, well, what if we could measure how much paper you use, and we could just go plant trees in your name and give you some certificate that we would source from whoever we planted the trees through, whether it was the Arbor Day Foundation or the Nature Conservancy, something like that. So that's what we did, is we implemented this marketing idea. And these customers are pretty large, Fortune 500 up to like Fortune 1000. And they just latched onto it right away and said, this is really cool. They wanted to talk about that more than they wanted to talk about anything else to do with our business relationship. It was too boring for them. So this sparked kind of my entrepreneurial path. And I took this idea inside this other company, and I left, and I started it as its own business, where I could then build it out, not just as a marketing idea, but an entire software platform that would, not to get too technical, but would tie down and integrate with a lot of existing systems across the print industry, where we could automatically measure a customer's paper footprint, and then also automatically offset it by planting trees through projects around the world. And so that just kind of restructured my whole mindset, my motivation, my purpose, where, I was now sprinting to get out of bed in the morning and start building this business and trying to recruit other people around this enthusiasm and this journey. And so that was about 10 years ago. And, it started from a blank sheet of paper, but we built the platform. It took us a couple of years to really do 2 things. One, build this software platform, which is really robust, but also the first customers I went to, I called on some of the biggest fish. I remember having a meeting with Xerox before we even had a product, and I was pitching this idea to them. And the lady I was meeting with was, expert in sustainability, and she was sort of vetting me and the company. And she said, "This is a really cool idea," but she said, how do we know the trees are going to get planted?" And I said, "Well, we're going to do that through reputable partners like the Nature Conservancy, just like you do now. You write them a check, you trust that the trees are going to get planted." And she's like, that's not going to be good enough, for us to warrant that to our customers. So this, not only was a journey of purpose, but it was a journey that was like a labyrinth at times, like chasing things that I knew nothing about. And in this case, building a standard of governance around how you actually audit forests and send people to physically count trees. And we have dedicated zones to build, large scale forests around the world. So that's kind of been my journey. What it amounts to today is, we're happy to say, and I need to thank Liz Richardson. She along with Indigo Inc. and Matt were one of the earliest adopters of print relief. I'm not sure how many years it goes back now, but the product's been active in the market for 7 years, so maybe 6 years ago or so.
Okay.
And the headlines now are we've got 8 reforestation projects that we're now planting into at scale around the world. We are planting about 2,200 trees per day. And this is an aggregate because we've got 18,000 customers. So as they print, their data flows in, we automatically plant trees into the forest that they choose. And so my purpose hasn't really shifted at all. It's just continued to grow, but the impact has grown that much more. And so that just keeps you going, keeps you chasing higher numbers, that sort of thing. But that's kind of my intersection of conscious capitalism.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah.
So you guys basically in your introductions have already stated, generally speaking, why you started your company and what your purpose is. Is there anything you guys want to add on to that, that question? What is your purpose and why did you start your company?
I can add one quick thing.
Okay.
It's really more on the capitalism side of maybe this conversation. I'm financially motivated as a person. It's not something I apologize for. At the same time, I want it to impact something that's greater than making money. And so that's, I think if somebody's thinking about getting into a business that sort of rides that fence, there's going to be some people that maybe question it, that don't opt into it, that view it more as a nonprofit service. And you have to be comfortable standing up for what you stand for, your principles in that mission, and we accept it. We're selling a premium service at the same time we're delivering positive impact to the environment and to people, and so that's what it is, and that's what we're representing, and so we're comfortable with it. But that was something that I didn't really expect when I started the company. That it has been a process of acceptance early on.
Can I just add one thing to what you said, Jordan? Because it, clearly rings a bell for us as well. Although in our case, what we had to contend with, that's not the right word, what we had to take into consideration is that Holly and I, we had this vision and there was no question about it. But as Holly pointed out, this was a much larger project than what we were used to. And so we knew we couldn't do it alone. And so we needed to make sure that we had partners who, although they were perhaps came from a different place in terms of their capitalism than where we were coming from. Yes, we all wanted to be successful. The numbers had to work. We wanted to make sure that we could convince them that if they wanted to go on this ride with us and do this creative thing, that they actually had to appreciate and support the fact that you're going to have to spend a little bit more money in order to do things sustainably than not. So that was the one thing. And then the other thing you had to, in our sense, to the extent you're going to start a business or take on a project of this size, you also have to get consultants and contractors and people who basically also support, understand, and are not interested in just cutting corners in order to get the thing done so that you can start dropping to the bottom line. So I totally appreciate what you were saying. It's something that we've had to take into consideration all the way along the line, and including to the tenants that we have throughout the center, because we're basically saying, yes, it's going to cost a little bit more for you to use compostable products, for example, but that's part and parcel of what we're trying to do. And as a result, they sort of become part of this, again, community that totally respects and thanks us ultimately for helping them be capitalists, but the right kind, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I guess I would add to that I think it's a testament to not compromising on those principles that all of us have espoused for our businesses, and that you succeed, that the business makes money, that the business stays in business, that the business accomplishes the objectives that it's set out to accomplish. If those corners are not cut, if the mission remains intact, if the purpose is not compromised. And in my case, that's why the first business did have to ultimately fold and start over again, because the partners, and I really wish for you, the Stones, that I really hope that your partners are good, because it is so hard to find people of like mind when you're talking about things that are hard. Like, it is going to cost more money to remain on purpose, and to not cut those corners, and to maintain the objectives that you set out when you have high standards like that. But if the proof is in the pudding at the end, that my business is still around and their business is not, or like in my case, the gluten-free movement has been around for a while now, and there's tons of businesses that have come and gone and come and gone. And I would argue, looking back, a lot of those businesses that don't exist anymore are the ones that just got into it because they saw dollar signs. They saw that there was a market opportunity, and they weren't in it for the right reasons. And so they were cutting corners, or they were just there for the money. The money is there if you're in it for the right reasons, and you prove that you are part of the community. You prove that you're doing good with your work, and that you're there to support your customers, and that you're there to do your mission. You will succeed, you will thrive, and so will your customers.
And again, since we're talking about businesses, I think, getting partners, it's a symbiotic relationship. Nobody gets a partner unless they need them, right? We'd all do it on our own if we didn't need a partner, because then we rule the world. The hardest part, and it was easy for us because we were already this nucleus of two saying, I understand what you're telling me, partners, but you agreed that we were going to do it this way because it's our vision. And those were the days where you go home at the end of the day and you go, I don't know if we're going to do this. Because if we can't do it the way we want to do it, I don't want to do it, right? And yet we can't do it without them. So it's really talking people through it. It's like, it's going to be okay. It'll take longer to make any money, and it will take longer to do this. It'll take longer to do it right. But it's like building something. If you don't have that foundation that's as strong as you can make it, you can't build anything on top of it that isn't going to crumble. And it's worth the time, and it's worth the money. And you may know that deep inside yourself, but it's taking that time to convince other people that it's worth it.
And the proof is in the fact that partners who we've worked with, we knew a long time before this project from other things in the community that we had done, or that we were a part of. But to now find one of those people who is very prominent in business in other parts of Howard County, talking about sustainability for their other projects.
Yeah.
And sort of in now embracing it as one of their, because their name is also on the plaque that we got from the Green Building Industry, right? And so then you go home at the end of the day and you go, it was worth all the, the cursing and
because if we just keep talking to like-minded people, nothing grows. It just stays stagnant, and then we die off. And I mean, I've been in the environmental movement since before Earth Day, and I've watched it, peak and drop, and then peak and drop. So we have to talk to people that aren't the choir. You have to figure out a way, or it goes away after a while. People aren't excited about it anymore.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I can understand. So have you ever found yourself really, so you guys have talked about the need to be profitable, to make money, and in the end, it has to be financially viable. And also the need to uphold your values and your purpose and why you're kind of in this. And have you ever found the two to be sometimes like so much at odds where you were really conflicted on how to move forward?
Um, I'll just say that I have had some decisions that have been difficult. It's not been, you know, make or break the business decision, you know, except for stopping and starting the business in 2014. There have been difficult decisions where we have said, you know, this is what we think we're going to have to do in order to do what we think is right in terms of ingredients and that type of thing, which are expensive. But it's the right thing to do. And it's just about educating the consumers about why it's going to make the cost so much more expensive. And not to get too into the weeds with it, but one of the reasons why we're not on a lot of grocery store shelves, for example, is we've made a conscious decision not to go that route through the distributor and broker model because of cost. We are a direct to consumer company. So we're on, you know, we're at David's Natural Markets, for example, and Mom's Markets, for example, but we're not in Whole Foods or Giant or Safeway or whatever because of cost, because our products are much more expensive than say Bob's Red Mill or something, which is just basically cheap rice flour. And so what we do is we educate the customer on why cheap rice flour is as good as the cheap bag that it's put in. And you can't make that education, you can't educate the customer in a grocery store. And that you're never going to educate them on why a $3 bag of gluten-free flour is so different from mine in a grocery store. So you educate them online and you give them that information online, and then you serve them online. And so that was an early decision that we had to make. And our customers are very, very happy with that decision because they're happy with the results that they get. But we had to make that sort of pivot that way, rather than just trying to compete solely on cost. It just was the wrong decision to make because it was a compromise.
Yeah.
I can add to that. It's a very similar story. That our business hasn't really been at odds where, you know, it's been an internal challenge. It's more just the market, and we're putting forth an offer to customers to decide whether, when they print, if they want to add environmental value to that process. So in the context of, if I can plug Indigo Ink for a second, Liz. Indigo Ink has partnered with Print Relief to reforest all of the paper that they print on in our certified way, the way we do it. And then they represent that to their clients. So hopefully on some level, you know, we're complementing the value of the Indigo Ink brand and extending it to their clients, maybe giving them something new and innovative to talk about, but also has environmental value, maybe competitive value. But if Indigo Ink wasn't doing that, and there's printer X over here that's not a Print Relief partner, but could be, they have the opportunity to extend to their customers a decision as, you know, do you want to do the right thing and, you know, certifiably put back the paper that's been ultimately taken from wood harvested from forests? That's the decision they make. And do they want to pay a little bit more for that? Well, not everybody says yes. So that's where, you know, our friction is in trying to grow the business, is trying to educate more people and try to get them more aware of, you know, the many multitude of environmental issues we face and how we can help, you know, add value to solving them. And their purchases are part of that decision-making process. So that's where I think it plays out for us.
Yeah, and just to share a little about that story, when we chose as Indigo Ink to print relief all of our printing, it was because we started out by offering it to our clients and asking them if they wanted to print relief it. And even though it might have cost them 2 cents, it wasn't actually about the money. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but they just didn't take the time to make that decision. And so we decided as a company, you know what, we're just going to make the decision for them. So anyway, that's a little background story on that one.
And I put on my environmental educator's hat and say, even if they hadn't, people don't think about where the paper's coming from and that they can be a part of that cycle. And it may not be great for the business that's trying to grow that, but it's still, you're imprinting something on someone that's using that word, imprinting on somebody, the idea that it's a possibility. It's in their control as much as anybody else's to replace what they've used. And that is like, Jordan, we got to talk after this, man. I got to start doing that.
So how would you say the pandemic has affected your business in that? Has it impacted your purpose or changed your purpose? Has anything shifted from that, or is it sort of business as usual for you?
I can actually speak to that very quickly. It was actually a place that I wanted to go with the conversation anyway, because, you know, as in the previous exchange was talking about when, you know, were there moments when you said, wow, you know, what are we going to do now kind of thing? Well, let's face it, that's been the real cruelty in at least an economic sense for what this pandemic has wrought, along with all the other horrible things that we've had to contend with as a population. But I can speak for us personally that, you know, when you look at sort of your profit loss ledger every month and you go, okay, it's getting a little better. And then all of a sudden you can see these trends. And then all of a sudden there is this unbelievable thing that comes and crushes everything that you've been working towards. It's demoralizing, or you're so dispirited. And yet, you know, what it really brought out and you know, I think in particular of the Common Kitchen, although also for the Commons, is that it really then separates people who are really passionate, because then they look at whatever they have to do to try and, you know, to try and turn that corner. And in this case, you know, that we've all been given some opportunities with PPP and EIDL loans and grants and things like that. And it all of a sudden now this whole community re-energizes around the idea that you know, if I can tell you a better way to apply for that grant or for that loan or whatever. And so, and us as landlords, frankly, being able to say, okay, yeah, I get it. We all have to, you know, we're going to defer your rent for a couple of months because we're able to do it. So it's stimulated again, this whole sense of community and passion around what's meaningful to people as an outcome. So it's been negative, but positive.
Jordan, I don't know if you want to comment on how it's affected your industry. I definitely have a comment from
Sure, go
my
ahead.
perspective as well, but okay, as I mentioned, we're direct to consumer brand, and that was a choice we made a long time ago for other reasons, some of which I've mentioned. It just so happened that when everyone was locked up in their houses, people stopped going to the grocery store. So people were ordering their food online. So a lot of people actually found my brand for the first time. And so it did not negatively impact our company. In fact, it positively impacted our company, because when people try my products, they tend to like them a lot and to buy them again. And so our biggest hurdle has been getting the word out about our products, because we're a small company and we don't have a large marketing budget. So, you know, we don't advertise a lot or things like that. So it's been, just we've had steady growth over the years. So it's, what do we do? What's going to be a game changer to get the products into more and more and more people's hands? Well, having people locked in their houses and making their own food and buying food online was a bit of a game changer. So especially for people who have food allergies and gluten-free. I failed to mention at the beginning, my products are not just gluten-free. They're also certified free of the top 8 food allergens. So I serve a much larger community than just simply the gluten-free community. And one of my cookbooks is also all about food allergens and as well. So the outreach that was done at that point, and the fact that we happened to have been able to meet the needs, thankfully for the customers, and also thankfully for our business, we were able to meet the needs of the demand for the most part. When the demand hit with COVID last year, has been good for our business in terms of exposure. And we feel very blessed to have been able to be in a position to help people, and also blessed for the growth that has come from that. And it's an odd position to be in, because you look around and you see so many people who were affected, as you all were, in industries where they're reliant upon foot traffic. And we're, the exact opposite of that. And so our industry was, benefited while other industries suffered. So it's been a really interesting experience being on this side of it. But I do feel blessed to have been able to help people from where we sat, being able to do that, from a distance, because we've always, provided food delivered to people's doors. So that we just continue to do that. We just did it more during COVID. So that's how it affected our business.
Yeah, unfortunately, ours was not as good of a situation, if you want to call it that. We serve 2 different sides of the print industry. We serve the commercial print market, companies like Indigo Ink and their customers who are printing anywhere from, say, business cards to brochures, collateral, that type of thing. We also serve the office print market. So, law firms, banks, anyone who's going to commercial office space and has a lot of printing going on in that environment. And so when the pandemic hit, anybody who was working in the office space retracted to go home, and we weren't able to migrate, our solution to at-home printing really at all. So that the whole segment didn't go to zero. We still had a lot of other industry verticals like healthcare, which are actually printing more. Some of our customers were in the voting industry where they're printing ballots. We just had election season, so we were saved by that to some extent, but it certainly was a big drop. But the positives that came out of it allowed us to kind of reevaluate some internal processes that we could squeeze more profit into the company, just root out some waste that might have been taking place that we weren't really paying attention to, and some overhead. And then on the sales side, we just pivoted 100% to focus on commercial printers. And instead of calling into office print side of the market, we said, let's just put that on the back burner for a year and put all of our attention into commercial printers, because Liz, you could speak to this, but the commercial printing, from our view of things, did not recess as much as office printing. And so that's how we were able to kind of save ourselves, in addition to some of the federal benefits like the PPP loans. And we're coming out of it okay. We're like right back where we were before the pandemic hit, but we've done it through, growth to get back to par. So we're hopeful that base business will return as things start to clear up and people return to the office. But that's how it worked out for us.
The only thing I'd like to add is the word you just used, the pivoting, the flexibility. We have found that no matter what the business is, if they've been flexible, they've done okay. I won't say they've done great, but that flexibility in thinking and how do we pivot, and that has been crucial in the last 14 months, I would say, for whatever the business is. It's across the board.
Well, I'm going to squeeze in one last question because we are coming up towards the end of our time. What gives you hope for the future?
I can go first. For me, it's the next generation. It's the employees that we're recruiting. Often a number of them are fresh out of college. They're coming out of college with degrees in sustainability, master's degrees in sustainability that covers something very comprehensive, but they're dedicating their career from day one towards this effort. And so I'm seeing, and partially it's because of what our company does, we're attracting that talent and interest, but they're wanting to carry it forward. On the other side, with our customers, the print business is an old industry. And so you have a lot of old thinking with that. And that's been part of what we've had to penetrate. But we've been chipping away at it, and we're starting to see it turn over. And part of that story is, we may have contacts with, say, executive leaders in marketing or sustainability at a company like Xerox who partner with us. But they're coming to us now and saying more and more of our customers are looking for solutions like this because their employees are looking for solutions like this in the companies that they work for. And so the value system is sort of the groundswell from the next generation, whether they're working for a company like ours or they're working at a company we serve, which is encouraging to me. So I expect it to continue as we go forward. Hopeful.
Thanks.
Well, I guess I'll go. I mean, I get all kinds of just good vibes from meeting other people like this. I mean, this gives me hope for entrepreneurial endeavors and capitalism in general. Just I love getting to meet other people who are passionate about their businesses and that are doing good things for the community. When I was looking up the websites of the folks who were on this panel, I was just like, I went in and told my husband, I was like, I didn't even know this Clarksville Commons thing was a thing. That's so cool. I have to go check this out. Like, I love this idea. And I knew about Print Relief because I knew we get all of our printing done at Indigo, of course. And I knew about Print Relief already, and I thought that was awesome. And I was excited to get to meet Jordan and know more about his business. But I just, this kind of thing just jazzes me. And I love feeling just the enthusiasm of other people who are passionate about what they're doing re-energizes me and makes me hopeful about, starting other businesses. Every day, more and more businesses are starting, and the pivoting that's occurring just even because of the pandemic. I mean, think of the new businesses that are starting that would not have been starting because they weren't needed before the pandemic, and everything has changed so much in our lives, and for the worse and for the better. There's just so many things that are out there that are different, and it's just, to me, that's encouraging. You have to try to look at the bright side, right? But I like meeting fellow like-minded enthusiasts, and so this brings me joy and hope.
I'll speak for me, but I think Holly can jump in. It comes in two different ways where the hope comes from. One, the way I see it, is the resiliency in people, whether it be a proprietor, meaning a business owner, or the people who really appreciate what we've accomplished or what we've tried to, the message that we've tried to send. Especially now, where we still are very, very concerned, and we practice very sort of strict precautions around COVID, being either on the commons per se, the courtyard or the commons area where we have activities, or in the common kitchen itself. And yet it's just tremendous to see that both the tenants as well as the community at large now more than ever appreciates what we're trying to do. And I think that, again, as Holly was saying at the beginning, sort of the subtle message, it clearly has taken root to some degree, because they really, they come back and they sort of thank us, or thank the tenants for what they, for their flexibility and their perseverance as well. So short term, that hope is, and that good feeling is around the fact that like we've heard the president and everybody else say, we're going to get through this together. And, there is a bright light at the end of the tunnel. And as long as we persevere, we can do that. Long term, as far as our business is concerned, although Holly and I are trying to retire, whatever that means, we already have another project that we're looking at that will be sort of the next version of this in a different setting. So it's a hopeful, positive, optimistic sort of outlook all the way around for us.
I think that the optimism comes from the fact that, like Jules said, groups like this exist, and that we're talking about it, and that we're talking to people who've never thought about it. And I always believe that it's education. People they're not doing the wrong thing because they want to do the wrong thing. They're doing the wrong thing because they don't know the right thing. So it gives me hope when I hear people talking about it at parties, when I hear people talking about how to help others, how to mentor, how to be more conscientious, how to be more mindful. It's now part of our lexicon. It's not something that's relegated to, those tree huggers or, those hippies or, whatever. It's, do-gooders. It's like, when was the last time you heard somebody say do-gooders? I mean, I'm hoping, you asked about hope. The hope is that it is a part of who we are becoming more of. I'm just hoping we start evolving a little faster. That's all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for coming and for sharing. And before we move on to some closing remarks, is there anything the three of you guys would like to share? Any other thing you want to add in before I hand this over to Ebony, who's the president of C3MD, to close us out?
Just thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Holly, you were on mute.
Thank you for having us. And somebody asked the name of the camp. It's in Maine, and it's called Medomak, MEDOMAK.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. This has been really, it's been fun for me, but I loved getting to hear from the other panelists. It's been really insightful, and it was a joyful experience. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank everyone.
Great.
And Ebony, take it over.
Well, thanks for letting me hop on a little bit late today, but certainly happy to hear the discussion today. This is about community. And so I have to give some thank yous. So just bear with me for just a moment. I want to say a bunch of thank yous. Thank you to all of you for joining our discussion today. Thank you to our event sponsors, Indigo Inc., Insight 180, Kevin Howard, CPA. Thank you to our speakers. Certainly a very enlightening discussion. Jules, Jordan, Holly, George, thank you so much. For those of you who donated to our community partner, Columbia Community Care, and or to C3MD, thank you. Thank you to the planning committee. And then finally, let me give you a little bit of information about our next event. It is a little bit of a different take on our monthly events. Next month's discussion is coffee and collaboration. Different take. We want to include more of you in on our discussion. So we invite you to sign up for 30 minutes of some facilitated discussion, followed by 30 minutes of networking, another opportunity for us to continue to build community around this topic of purpose and meaningful work. And then finally, don't wait until May 18th. So we're here, we're not going anywhere. And so connect with us on Facebook. We are around. We would love for you to follow us and also engage with us so we can continue the conversation. Wherever you are on Facebook, I guarantee you we are there too. Facebook, LinkedIn, and IG. And so with that, I will close us out for the day. I think we are about 1 minute over. Lovely discussion. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
It was great. Thank you.